Half of the 10th century, Seljuk state weakened as a result of migration from north and east. Upon this, a commander of Oghuz state, Seljuk Bey, migrated to Transylvania with his people and settled in the city of Sen. This region was an area where Islam was the primary religion among Samanids at the time, and that made Seljuk Bey choose Islam with his family as well. After his conversion to Islam, the people around him, and especially the armed Oghuzes, gathered under his leadership. This nomadic community gained vast pastures by giving troops to the Karahanlis and Samanids in wars, and became influential in the administration of the Samanid state. When the Samanid state collapsed, Seljuk Bey settled in Khorasan with his Muslim people. Following Seljuk Bey's death in 1009, they went further south. Under the command of Seljuk Bey's son Arslan Bey of the 10th In the second half of the 10th century, Seljuk state weakened as a result of migration from north and east. Upon this, a commander of Oghuz state, Seljuk Bey, migrated to Transylvania with his people and settled in the city of Send. This region was an area where Islam was the primary religion among Samanids at that time, and that made Seljuk Bey choose Islam with his family as well. After his conversion to Islam, the people around him, and especially the armed Oghuzes, gathered under his leadership. This nomadic community gained vast pastures by giving troops to the Karahanlis and Samanids in wars, and became influential in the administration of the Samanid state. When the Samanid state collapsed, Seljuk Bey settled in Khorasan with his Muslim people. Following Seljuk Bey's death in 1009, they went further south. Under the command of Seljuk Bey's son Arslan Bey, they were strong enough to make Karahanlis and Ghaznavids worry about them. After Arslan Bey's arrest by Ghaznavids and his death in 1032, Seljuk Bey's grandsons, Tuğrul Bey and Çağrı Bey, attempted to attain independence. In 1035, the Seljuks defeated a large Ghaznavid army and proceeded into Khorasan, and after 2 years, they seized the city of Mary, the city that is located in Turkmenistan today. In the Battle of Dandanakan, they defeated the Ghaznavids once more and entered the city of Nishapur and at last declared their independence. Tuğrul Bey has become the new ruler, and thus the great Seljuk state was established. Also, the city of Mary was now the capital city. A congress was convened to determine the executives, and after that, the members of the Seljuk family went all around and started the conquest movements. In a short period of time, the newly established state dominated all Islamic lands in the region. Sultan Tuğrul entered Baghdad on January 17, 1055, upon the invitation of the Abbasid Caliph to save Baghdad and to defeat the Buvayhis. Tuğrul Bey has granted the wish of the Abbasi Caliph and restored his position as Caliph once more. He gained the appreciation of the Islamic world and gained great compliments. In 1058, Tuğrul Bey has become the ruler of the East and West, declared by Caliph himself. The declaration of the Seljuk Sultan by the Caliph as Khan gave great respect to the Turks and pumped their warrior spirit and led them to embrace the Islamic religion more closely. Unfortunately,
I think these are the Harry Potter, the goblet competition guys. They're the ones. Then the maroon. I think they're the maroon guys, like the linebacker size guys.
Tuğrul Bey passed away in 1063 at the age of 70. Since Tuğrul Bey did not have a son, Çağrı Bey's son Alparslan became the Sultan of the Seljuk state. He began his conquest by turning his eyes to the west. He wandered through the Caucasus and conquered small local kingdoms. He conquered the famous fortress of Ani in the northeastern part of the eastern Anatolia in 1064 and entered Kars on August 16th. Ani was one of the holy places of the Christian world, therefore it had an enormous importance. At the end of 1065, the Sultan turned east and walked to Mangishlag. At the end of the expedition, the Kipchaks and the Turkmen, who hid the trade routes, were taken under control. In 1067, systematic conquest movements in East and West, attrition and intimidation raids continued until the Battle of Manzikert on August 26, 1071, and with the victory, they took their first step into Anatolia. After the victory, they couldn't treat with the Byzantine Emperor Diogenes, because he was already deposed. Sultan Alparslan ordered the conquest of the whole Anatolia by ordering the commander and his lords, to enforce the treaty by force and power. The Turkmen tribes under the Seljuk rule were sent from Central Asia to the west and sent to the Byzantine frontier in eastern Anatolia. Byzantine fortresses and garrisons, which couldn't resist the invasion of the Seljuk forces, passed into the hands of the Turks. The Turkish invasion extended to the shores of the Sea of Marmara, and the conquered Anatolia was inhabited. All necessary measures were taken for the Turkification and Islamization of Anatolia. Unfortunately, once more, Sultan Alparslan was murdered by a castle commander who was taken as prisoner. His son and heir, Melikshah, became the new Sultan of the Great Seljuk state. He won the war against his uncle Kavurd and ensured public order in the state with death of Kavurd a few days later. He also took care of the internal affairs and took advantage of the struggle for the throne and went on a campaign against the Ghaznevits and Karahanli, who attacked the Seljuk borders, and he managed to defeat both states. Assuring the eastern borders, Sultan directed all his power to the west. He took Turkish tribes, all of Iran, Arabia, Syria and Palestine under his administration. He paid the ultimate attention to the conquest of Anatolia and continued his conquest with experienced commanders. The Seljuks, who seized places such as Antakya, Diyarbakir and Mosul, started to assign governors to control them. Meanwhile, the conquest of Syria continued rapidly, and important points such as Aleppo and Damascus were taken. The Shiite Fatimid state was struck by great blows. Therefore, we can easily say that the era of the Sultan Melikshah was the peak of the Seljuks in all respects. During the reigns of Mahmud I, Berk-Yoruk, Muizzeddin Melikshah and Mehmet Tapar, the great Seljuk state gradually lost its power and central control in the provinces. Dynasty members and some governors declared their independence. Ahmet Sencer, who had the throne in 1118, succeeded in reunifying the territory of the country. Even though for a short amount of time, the country experienced a second spring and regained its prestige. But the state never reached its limits and authority, like in the days of Melikshah. In 1128, the Karahittai subjugated the eastern and the western Karahanli state and became a neighbor to the great Seljuk state and began to put pressure on them. The great Seljuk state, which was defeated in the Battle of Katwan, entered a process of rapid disintegration. The occupation of Transoxiana, which was the most fertile land of the state, put the economy and army of the great Seljuk state in trouble. In 1153, Sultan Sencer fell captive to the nomadic Oguzes who rebelled due to the increasing economic depression. He escaped for 2 years, but died in 1157 before he regained power in the country. Thus the great Seljuk state ended. After this date, the lands of the great Seljuks came under the control of the Harzemshahs to a great extent.